The cafe was warm, a small refuge from the chilly winter wind that pressed against the windows. People sat quietly, sipping coffee or eating their lunch, lost in their own worlds. Among them, a young woman sat at a corner table, her back slightly hunched, her eyes shifting nervously between the door and the counter. She wore a worn jacket, slightly too big for her, and her shoes were scuffed. Everything about her seemed to whisper that she wanted to be invisible. Her hands were wrapped around a small paper bag, crumpled at the edges, holding a modest lunch she had just bought. She had been careful, choosing the cheapest items she could find, hoping to make them last for herself and her little girl waiting at home. She had counted her money multiple times before approaching the counter, hoping that the total would match what she had. But as the cashier had rung up the items, it had become clear she would fall short. Her heart had thumped fast, her face flushing with embarrassment, but she had tried to remain calm. She whispered something under her breath, a quiet apology that no one seemed to hear, and handed over what she could. Now, she sat in the corner, waiting, hoping no one noticed her shortfall. The bag rested on the table, its contents simple: a sandwich, a small fruit cup, and a bottled water. Enough for one, maybe, but not for two. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her situation pressing down on her shoulders. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows, and she glanced at the door again. Thinking about how quickly she could leave and avoid any more attention, her eyes scanned the room, taking in the people around her. Most were immersed in their own lives, some on laptops, others talking quietly. She noticed a father with a little girl sitting across the cafe, playing with a small toy. She hesitated for a moment, feeling a pang of longing. She remembered her own daughter, waiting at home, hungry, and trusting that she would be taken care of. The thought tightened her chest, and she gripped the paper bag a little tighter. She rose slowly, careful not to draw attention, and moved toward the door. Her movements were small, almost shy, as if she wished the floor itself would open and let her slip out unnoticed. She could feel her heart racing, and her mind spun with worry. Would someone stop her? Would they notice she hadn't paid enough? She had faced such moments before, and each time, the fear of judgment, of being looked down upon, made her stomach churn. As she neared the door, she paused, her hand on the handle. She looked back at the little girl across the room, laughing softly at something her father had said. The scene brought a brief, painful smile to her face, reminding her of the warmth of her own child. She swallowed hard, steeling herself, and gently opened the door, hoping the winter wind would cover her escape. She moved quietly, her steps careful and measured, avoiding the attention of the cashier and other patrons. Outside, the air was sharp and cold, a contrast to the cozy warmth of the cafe. She clutched the bag to her chest, holding it as if it were a fragile treasure. She walked quickly, scanning the street for any familiar faces, any chance of recognition or judgment. Her mind raced with thoughts of her daughter, how she would greet her, the look on her face when she saw the food, the quiet relief that would follow a small meal. A few blocks away, she slowed, trying to catch her breath. Her body ached from the tension, the constant strain of worrying about how to survive and provide. Every day was a challenge, filled with small calculations and careful planning. How much money was left? How far could it stretch? Could she get enough food for the week? These thoughts never left her, even in moments like this, moments when she longed for a brief respite. She found a quiet bench near the side of the street and sat down, adjusting the bag on her lap. The sandwich was simple, but it was everything she had for her daughter today. She unpacked it slowly, as if taking care of it might somehow stretch it further, make it last longer. Her hands were careful, almost reverent, as she set aside the small fruit cup and water. Each item was a small victory, a proof that she had managed to provide something, however little, for the child she loved more than anything. As she prepared to continue her walk home, a man nearby caught sight of her. He didn't say anything at first, simply watched with quiet curiosity. There was something about the way she moved, the way she carried herself, that drew his attention. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful glances around, and the subtle way she tried to remain unnoticed. Something in his heart stirred. a quiet recognition of struggle and determination that went beyond what words could capture. The woman didn't notice him at first. She was focused entirely on the bag, on the careful handling of the food, on the steps that would take her home. Her mind was elsewhere, wrapped in the safety of thought and the hope that she could make it through another day. The wind blew around her, rustling her hair and jacket, but she paid it little mind. Her attention was solely on the little girl waiting for her. The one bright spot in a life filled with hardship. The man stood for a moment longer, observing quietly, sensing a story that went beyond the surface. He didn't rush to intervene, didn't judge or question. He simply watched, aware that sometimes understanding comes first, before action. In that brief moment, the two existed in the same space, their lives touching in a way neither yet fully realized. And in the woman's quiet struggle, there was a silent human story unfolding. One of love, responsibility, the quiet bravery it takes to survive and care for another in a world that often seems indifferent. The single father had been sitting quietly at a table across the cafe, watching his own little daughter play with a small toy she carried everywhere. He had come out that afternoon hoping to enjoy a rare moment of calm, a break from the chaos of his own life. As he sipped his coffee and watched the laughter of his child, his attention drifted across the room, landing on a young woman moving hesitantly toward the exit. There was something in the way she held herself, a careful, almost fragile tension, that made him pause. He noticed the way her hands clutched the small paper bag, the careful glances over her shoulder, and the slight hesitation in each step. He had seen uncertainty and worry in people before, but something about her felt different. It wasn't just nervousness or shyness. It was the weight of responsibility pressing down on someone who had no one to lean on. His mind wandered to his own experiences, raising a child alone, the constant juggling of work, bills, and care. He felt a tug in his chest, a quiet recognition of struggle and resilience. He didn't move at first. He simply watched as she approached the door, almost as if she were trying to merge with the background and vanish. There was a small tension in her shoulders, a tightness in her jaw, and her steps were careful, almost too careful. The father felt a growing curiosity, not the idle kind, but one born of empathy. He wanted to understand, to see what lay behind those cautious movements. As she stepped outside, the cold air swept over her. The wind pushed at her hair and coat, but she barely noticed. She clutched the bag to her chest, as if holding it close could somehow shield her from the judgments of the world. The father rose from his chair, still observing, but keeping a careful distance. He didn't want to scare her, didn't want to intrude, but he felt compelled to see where her steps led. His own daughter called out a small question, and he waved her back to attention with a gentle smile. But his eyes stayed fixed on the woman. He noticed the way she slowed after a few blocks, moving toward a quiet bench on the side of the street. She seemed to be gathering her strength, preparing for the next part of her day. The father walked a little closer, careful to stay at a distance that wouldn't make her uncomfortable, yet close enough to see the details of her struggle. He could see the tension in her hands as she set the paper bag on her lap, and the way she unpacked the small items inside with meticulous care. Each movement seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if ensuring that nothing was wasted. Her eyes softened when she looked at the small sandwich she had bought. A fragile hope that it could be enough. The fruit cup and bottled water were small victories, tiny triumphs in a life that rarely offered them. The father felt a deepening respect for her quiet bravery. There was no complaint, no dramatic gestures, just a steady determination to care for her child despite the obstacles. He understood in that silent moment the depth of a mother's love, the lengths she would go to protect and provide. He noticed her pause now and then, looking around as if expecting someone to judge or confront her. Her body language spoke of years of learning to navigate a world that often seemed indifferent. He could almost feel the weight she carried, and it pressed on him in a way that was both heavy and moving. He remembered the nights he had stayed awake, worrying about providing enough for his own child, the anxiety that never quite left. In her, he saw a reflection of that struggle, magnified by the vulnerability of a single mother trying to survive. The father remained quiet, letting the moment unfold without interference. He watched her gently set aside the sandwich and fruit cup, as if arranging them with care could somehow stretch their usefulness. Her fingers lingered on the food, delicate and precise, and he realized how much love and thought went into even the simplest acts when caring for a child. The world might overlook such details, but they were monumental in the small, private victories of life. From across the street, a small child's laugh echoed, pulling the father's attention back for a moment. His own daughter giggled, and he smiled, but his eyes soon returned to the woman. He observed the subtle expressions of hope and relief that passed over her face, fleeting but unmistakable. It was clear that every small victory, every moment she could provide nourishment for her child, mattered deeply. The father felt a quiet admiration for her resilience, for the patience and determination it took to navigate the hardships she faced. He noticed that she occasionally looked around, as if measuring the distance between herself and the world. There was no shame in her eyes, not exactly, but a careful awareness of her surroundings, a sense of needing to protect both herself and her child from the scrutiny that life so often brings. Her movements were deliberate, small pauses marking the rhythm of survival, each step forward an act of courage. He continued to watch, slowly understanding that the story unfolding before him was one of love and sacrifice. She was not just a woman carrying a paper bag. She was a mother, a protector, a quiet hero, navigating a world that rarely offered support. In her eyes, he saw a mixture of worry, hope, and determination, the complex emotions that define the daily struggle of those who have little yet give everything. His heart felt heavy and full at the same time, touched by the quiet dignity of her actions. For a long while, he simply observed, letting the details speak to him. The careful handling of the food, the measured glances around, the pause at the bench each moment revealed a story of resilience. He could feel the undercurrent of fear, the constant calculation that defined her day-to-day life. Every decision was weighed, every movement considered. He understood now why she had tried to leave quietly, why she had wished to go unnoticed. It wasn't shame exactly. It was the burden of responsibility and the desire to protect her child from the harshness of reality. As the wind swept across the street, carrying a chill that made her shiver slightly, he took a step closer, still maintaining his distance. There was a part of him that wanted to intervene, to offer help, but he knew that such gestures must be approached carefully, with respect and understanding. He watched her straighten her back slightly, drawing strength from somewhere deep inside, preparing to continue the journey home. In that moment, he felt a surge of empathy, a recognition that sometimes the most profound stories unfold in silence. In unnoticed acts of care and courage, he stayed there for several minutes, allowing himself to simply witness her experience. Each detail, no matter how small, was a window into her world. The careful handling of the bag, the way her eyes softened when thinking of her child, the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted the food. He felt privileged to observe, and a quiet determination grew inside him to ensure that her story did not go unnoticed entirely. In the ordinary rhythm of an ordinary afternoon, he had discovered something extraordinary. It's the courage of a mother navigating life with limited means, yet unlimited love. The woman sat on the bench, her eyes fixed on the small paper bag on her lap. She gently unpacked the sandwich, fruit, and bottled water, taking care with every small movement. It wasn't just food. It was hope. It was survival. It was love in its purest form. She looked around once more, ensuring no one was watching too closely. The winter wind blew, tugging at her jacket and hair, but she barely noticed. Her mind was entirely focused on her daughter, imagining the moment they would sit together at home and share this simple meal. The single father stood a little ways off, still observing from a distance. He noticed how carefully she handled each item, the precision in her movements, and the way her eyes softened whenever she thought of the child waiting for her. There was a quiet dignity in the way she approached such a small task, a dignity born of necessity and love. He understood now why she had tried to leave the cafe quietly. It wasn't shame, not exactly, but the weight of responsibility and the hope that she could provide something without being judged. He took a step closer, making sure to remain visible but not threatening. His own daughter giggled at something in her toy, and he smiled briefly, but his eyes returned to the woman. She was adjusting the sandwich, checking to make sure it wasn't squished, rearranging the fruit cup slightly so it would stay fresh, and tightening the bottle cap. Every action spoke of care, of thought, of a deep love that demanded attention to detail. He felt a swelling respect for her, recognizing the courage it took to navigate a world that offered so little support at that moment. She glanced up, sensing someone nearby. Her eyes met his for a brief second, wide and wary, as if expecting criticism or judgment. Instead, he gave her a soft, understanding smile, one that spoke more than words ever could. She hesitated, unsure of his intentions, but something in his gaze reassured her. There was no accusation, no demand, just awareness and empathy. She relaxed slightly, returning her attention to the bag. Feeling a small flicker of relief that someone had noticed without condemning her, he watched as she carefully picked up the sandwich, unwrapping it slowly. The bread was plain, the filling minimal, but she handled it as though it were a precious treasure. Her fingers lingered on it for a moment, as if drawing strength from the simple object that represented so much. She set it aside momentarily to check the fruit cup, tapping it gently to make sure nothing was bruised or spilling. Every motion was deliberate, a quiet testament to her determination to provide the best she could with what little she had. The father's heart ached as he observed her. He remembered his own struggles, the countless nights spent worrying about whether he could feed his child, the fear of not being enough. He understood the depth of her responsibility, the constant calculations, the mental juggling that came with raising a child on limited means. He felt an urge to do something, to help, but he held back, waiting for the right moment. He knew that kindness had to be gentle, respectful, and sincere, especially in moments so personal and delicate. From her small bag, she pulled out a napkin and carefully laid it on the bench. She placed the sandwich on it, cutting it in half with careful precision, imagining the two halves for herself and her daughter. The fruit cup followed, carefully separated, and the water was set upright. Each action was small but significant, a quiet ritual that brought order and comfort to an otherwise uncertain life. The father could see the love in every movement, the unspoken promise that she would do everything possible to care for her child. She paused, looking down at the food, and for a moment, her face softened with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. It was a fleeting expression, but it revealed everything: the weight she carried, the hope she clung to, and the determination that drove her. He watched quietly, understanding that this was more than just a meal. It was a lifeline, a symbol of her resilience and devotion. He stepped a little closer, keeping his distance but making sure she noticed him. She glanced up again, and he nodded gently, silently communicating that he saw her struggle and understood it. There was no need for words yet. Sometimes simply acknowledging someone's effort without intrusion is the first step toward connection. She returned to her task, slightly reassured that the world had not entirely overlooked her, that someone had noticed without judging. The wind shifted, carrying a chill that made her shiver slightly. She hugged the bag closer to her chest, seeking warmth and comfort. The father noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the small tremor in her hands, and felt a deep empathy for her situation. He understood that every small act of care she performed was a triumph against a life that often offered obstacles instead of support. Her love for her daughter was evident in every gesture, in every careful motion, in every hesitant glance at the surrounding world. He saw her eyes lift toward the street occasionally, scanning for familiar faces or anyone who might judge her. It was clear she had learned to navigate the world cautiously, to protect herself and her child from scrutiny. Her awareness was sharp, her instincts finely tuned. And it was this very awareness that allowed her to survive in difficult circumstances. He felt admiration for her resilience, for the quiet courage it took to face each day with limited resources and unwavering determination. As she continued to organize the small meal, he noticed her glance toward the horizon, a moment of reflection, perhaps thinking about the challenges she faced daily. There was a mix of worry and hope in her expression, a balance that only those burdened with great responsibility could carry. He realized that her life was filled with these small but significant moments, each demanding attention, patience, and careful thought. Her strength lay not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, consistent effort to provide and protect. He remained silent, letting her continue. Understanding that any sudden movement or intrusion could disrupt the delicate balance of her focus, he watched the way she adjusted the food, the careful way she ensured nothing was wasted, and the subtle exhalation of relief as she completed each step. Every motion was an act of love, an affirmation of her commitment to her child. It was a story written not in words, but in gestures, in careful, in thoughtful actions that spoke volumes about her character. The father took a deep breath, feeling a mix of admiration and compassion. He thought about the countless others who might pass by such a scene, without noticing, without understanding. But he saw, and in seeing, he felt a connection. A shared understanding of the challenges and sacrifices that come with love and responsibility. He knew that her struggle was not unique, but it was hers alone. And witnessing it, even from a distance, was a privilege. For several minutes, he simply stood there, observing the woman as she carefully packed the food back into the paper bag, preparing to continue her journey home. Each item was handled with care, each action deliberate, each glance filled with a mixture of hope and vigilance. He felt inspired by her perseverance, humbled by her dedication, and moved by the quiet courage that defined her every move. In that ordinary street, on an ordinary afternoon, an extraordinary story of love, sacrifice, and resilience unfolded before him, quietly and without fanfare. Leaving an impression that would linger long after the moment passed, the father took a small, careful step forward, his mind racing with thoughts about how to help without embarrassing her. He could see the exhaustion in her movements, the way her shoulders sagged slightly under the weight of worry and responsibility. He also saw the love in every careful gesture, in the way she adjusted the sandwich and fruit, in the way she double-checked the water bottle. She was a mother through and through, determined to do everything right for her child despite the challenges. He spoke softly, his voice calm and unthreatening. "Excuse me? Would it be okay if I helped with that?" She startled slightly, her eyes wide, unsure what to make of him. Her lips parted, ready to decline, but there was something in his gentle tone, in the genuine care in his eyes that made her pause. She looked at him, her gaze filled with caution. Yet there was a flicker of hope, the smallest hint that maybe someone could understand without judging. He knelt slightly to be at her level, careful not to intrude, careful to communicate that he meant no harm. "I know it's hard sometimes," he continued quietly. "Sometimes we need a little help, and that's okay. Would you let me help get some things for your daughter?" Her hands tightened on the bag for a moment, and her chest rose and fell quickly, betraying the relief and anxiety swirling inside her. She hesitated, weighing the offer, unsure if it was real, unsure if it might bring judgment or shame. After a brief pause, she nodded slightly, the smallest motion, but enough to show she trusted him in this moment. He smiled gently, respecting her space, and reached into his own bag, where he had a few extra items he had picked up earlier. He offered a few sandwiches, a couple of fruit cups, and a small juice box for the child. She blinked, her lips trembling slightly, and tears threatened to spill over. She whispered a quiet, almost inaudible "thank you," her voice filled with emotion she had been holding in for hours. For days, for weeks, the father carefully placed the items beside her, letting her see everything but not touching her belongings. She studied the food for a moment, ensuring it was exactly what she needed, then looked up at him with wide, grateful eyes. It was not just the food I ate, it was the acknowledgement, the understanding, the act of kindness without judgment that moved her. For a brief moment, the weight on her shoulders lifted. Replaced by a small but powerful feeling of hope, she carefully packed the extra items into her bag, her fingers trembling slightly with a mix of exhaustion and relief. The father observed her, noticing how even small gestures, like securing the bag and straightening the sandwiches, were acts of love and protection. He could see the bond between mother and child reflected in every careful motion, and he understood the significance of these simple actions. They represented safety, sustenance, and the promise that despite the hardships, the child would not go hungry today. A small smile broke across her face. Hesitant at first, but growing as she realized that someone truly cared, that someone had taken the time to understand without asking for anything in return. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with gratitude. And for the first time that afternoon, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone, not completely. There were people in the world willing to notice, willing to act with kindness. Even in the smallest ways, the father nodded gently, understanding the depth of the moment. He didn't rush her, didn't push her to speak more than she was ready to. He simply watched, silently supporting her as she regained a bit of composure. He knew that moments like these were fragile, delicate, and needed space to breathe. He also knew that sometimes actions spoke louder than words, and in this case, the quiet gesture of bringing extra food conveyed more than any sentence could. She adjusted the bag again, carefully making room for the extra sandwiches and fruit, ensuring everything was secure. Her movements were deliberate, precise, reflecting the habit of someone who had learned to make limited resources stretch as far as possible. The father could feel her determination, her unwavering commitment to her child, and it inspired him. He realized that resilience often showed itself in quiet ways, in small acts of care that went unnoticed by the majority of the world. After a few moments, she looked at him again, her expression a mixture of gratitude and cautious relief. She spoke softly, her voice trembling just slightly. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done otherwise." The father nodded, acknowledging her words, but he didn't rush to reassure her. He knew that true comfort often came from simple understanding. From being seen and respected in a moment of vulnerability, he gestured toward her bag gently. "It's okay. You're doing an amazing job. Sometimes we all need a little help to get through the day, and that's nothing to be ashamed of." Her lips trembled as she nodded, absorbing the reassurance. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, and her breath slowed. As if some of the weight she had been carrying had lifted, the father remained there for several minutes, letting her gather herself, letting her regain her strength before continuing her journey home. He could see the small glimmer of hope returning to her eyes, a light that had been dimmed by worry and hardship, now flickering back to life. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to signal that she felt supported, if only for this brief moment. As she stood to continue walking, the father gave her a warm, encouraging nod. "Take care of yourself and your little one," he said softly. "You're not alone." She gave a small smile, her eyes shining with unshed tears, and whispered a quiet thank you again. She moved carefully, her steps measured. But there was a newfound lightness in her movement, a sense of relief mingled with gratitude. The father watched her leave, feeling a mixture of admiration and hope. He understood that this small act of kindness could ripple beyond the immediate moment, providing strength and encouragement for days to come. He also knew that everyone faced challenges, often unseen, and that taking the time to notice and act with compassion could make a profound difference. He turned to his own daughter, her laughter breaking the quiet tension, and felt grateful that he could model empathy, understanding, and quiet courage in action for the woman. The brief encounter with kindness had shifted something inside her. The food was important, yes, but more than that. The recognition of her struggle and the gentle support offered by a stranger had touched her deeply. She carried it with her as she walked toward home, each step lighter than before. The winter winds still pressed against her, but she felt a warmth within, a sense that someone in the world had truly seen her and understood. It was a small victory, a beacon of hope, and a reminder that even in difficult times, there are moments of connection, moments that remind us of the goodness in others and the power of compassion. The woman continued walking home, her bag now a little heavier, not just with the extra food, but with a newfound sense of hope. Each step felt lighter, the winter wind biting less sharply against her cheeks. She thought of her daughter, waiting patiently at home, perhaps wondering why she had taken so long. She imagined the look on her child's face when she saw the sandwiches, the fruit and the water, now enough for both of them. A soft smile crept onto her face, a rare and fragile moment of peace. She recalled the man who had helped her, the single father who had understood without question, who had offered support without judgment. It was not just the food, but the acknowledgement that someone saw her, truly saw her struggle, and responded with kindness. She felt warmth in her chest, a small ember of hope that had been difficult to kindle in recent days. She clutched the bag closer, thinking of how such simple acts of humanity could ripple through lives in ways that mattered far more than words. As she neared her small apartment building, she noticed a familiar figure in the window, a tiny head peeking out with curiosity and expectation. Her daughter had been waiting, and the sight brought a rush of relief and tenderness. She quickened her pace, careful not to jostle the bag too much, eager to reach home and share the small bounty she had gathered. Her mind raced with plans for a warm meal, the comfort of sitting together, and the laughter that might follow once hunger was no longer pressing. Inside, the little girl ran toward her as soon as she entered the door. Her face lit up, and she reached for the bag immediately, her tiny hands grasping at it with innocent anticipation. The mother smiled, crouching down to her level, and carefully handed over the sandwiches and fruit. Together, they unpacked the food, arranging it on the small table. And the room seemed to brighten with the simple act of sharing a meal. The woman's eyes glistened as she watched her daughter take the first bite, small satisfied smile spreading across her face. That smile, so pure and unguarded, was more valuable than any money, more precious than any luxury. It was the reason she persisted, the reason she carried on despite hardships. Later, as the child played quietly, the mother reflected on the afternoon and the man who had helped her. She thought about how rare it was to encounter someone so understanding, someone willing to step forward and offer help without expectation or judgment. It had restored a part of her faith in humanity, a belief that kindness still existed in small, powerful ways. She resolved to carry that forward, not just for herself, but as an example for her daughter, to show her that even in difficult times, there are people who care and who act with compassion. The single father, meanwhile, had returned home with his own daughter. Reflecting on the encounter, he felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of fulfillment in knowing he had made a difference, even in a small way. He thought about the importance of noticing others, of paying attention to the unnoticed struggles around him. The world could be harsh and unforgiving, but moments like these reminded him of the strength and resilience of the human spirit. He felt grateful that he could offer support, even if only briefly, and that he could model to his own child the values of empathy, compassion, and understanding. Over the following days, the woman found a renewed sense of energy and determination. She approached her daily challenges with a little more confidence, buoyed by the memory of the kindness she had received. Each small step felt slightly easier, each decision less daunting. She had been reminded that help could come unexpectedly, and that there were people willing to understand without questioning. It gave her courage, the courage to keep striving, to keep caring, and to continue doing everything possible for her daughter. The daughter, now full and content, played nearby, unaware of the depth of her mother's worries, but benefiting from every ounce of effort she invested. The mother watched her child, a mixture of love, relief, and quiet pride swelling in her chest. She knew the days ahead would still be challenging, but the burden felt slightly lighter now. She could face tomorrow with hope, strengthened by the small yet profound reminder that someone had seen her struggle and acted with kindness. It was a memory that would stay with her, a lesson in the power of empathy and the human connection that can transform lives. The father continued his routine with his own child, sharing stories and small lessons about noticing the needs of others, about offering help whenever possible. The encounter in the street had reinforced for him the importance of empathy, of being attentive and responsive to the struggles of those around him. He hoped that his daughter would carry this lesson forward, that she would learn to see the world with compassion and to act with courage and care as weeks passed. The woman found herself more confident in approaching daily life, more willing to accept support when offered, and more determined to create a better future for her child. The act of kindness she had received became a touchstone, a reminder of the quiet power of empathy. She carried it with her, letting it influence her actions. guiding her toward moments of understanding and care for others in similar circumstances. In the end, the afternoon that began with fear and hesitation had transformed into a story of hope, resilience, and human connection. The small act of kindness from the single father had created a ripple, touching lives in ways that went beyond food and immediate need. It had rekindled hope, strengthened bonds, and reminded both mother and observer of the profound impact one person can have by simply noticing, understanding, and acting with compassion. The mother and her daughter continued their routines, facing challenges with quiet determination and renewed hope. The memory of that afternoon remained with them, a guiding light in moments of doubt and struggle, and the father, carrying his own lessons, continued to nurture empathy and awareness in his own child, ensuring that the values of kindness and understanding would extend into the next generation. In small, meaningful ways, the world seemed a little brighter, a little more connected, and a little more full of human goodness after the events of that afternoon. The woman found herself reflecting on the encounter often. It lingered in her mind not just because of the help she received, but because of the way someone had truly seen her struggle. It was unusual to be noticed without judgment, to have her efforts acknowledged quietly yet sincerely. She felt a mixture of gratitude and a renewed determination to face life's challenges. Knowing that someone out there had recognized her humanity, she returned to her daily routine, waking early to prepare for work, balancing the responsibilities of her home, her child, and the endless tasks that seemed to multiply every day. Yet there was a difference now in her movements, a subtle shift in her posture and her steps. She walked a little taller, breathed a little easier, and faced the world with a quiet confidence that she had not felt in weeks. The memory of that small act of kindness had become a source of strength, a quiet reassurance that she could continue forward, that she was not completely alone at home. She noticed how her daughter's laughter seemed louder, more genuine. The girl played with her small collection of toys, unaware of the weight her mother carried daily. Yet benefiting from every careful decision and sacrifice, the mother watched with a mix of pride and relief, grateful that at least for now, her child was fed, safe, and happy. She realized that these small victories, these moments of stability and peace, were worth cherishing. Each one became a reminder that her efforts, no matter how unnoticed by the world, truly mattered. In the evenings, she would sit quietly, reflecting on her life and the recent encounter with the single father. She thought about how rare it was to find people who acted with such genuine compassion without expectation. The memory of his calm voice, the careful way he offered help, and the absence of judgment remained vivid in her mind. She realized that kindness could come at unexpected times, and it often left an impact far beyond the immediate moment. It wasn't the food alone. It was the recognition and understanding that stayed with her, quietly influencing her outlook on life. She began to notice small details in her surroundings that she had previously overlooked. A neighbor holding a struggling bag of groceries, a child sitting alone on a park bench, someone fumbling with coins at a cafe. These small moments reminded her of herself, of the vulnerability she had felt. She felt a new empathy rising within her. It was as if the kindness she had received had opened her eyes to the unseen struggles around her, inspiring her to respond with care whenever possible. Meanwhile, the single father continued to reflect on the encounter from his own perspective. He thought about the woman and her child often, wondering how they were doing, hoping that the small gesture he had made had lasting effects. It reinforced for him the importance of paying attention, of recognizing that sometimes help could be offered in subtle, thoughtful ways. He understood that life was filled with invisible battles, that a simple act of awareness could ripple outward, affecting more than anyone might expect. The father shared the story with his own daughter, carefully framing it as a lesson in empathy and kindness. He emphasized the importance of noticing when someone struggles and offering help without seeking recognition. He watched her child absorb the story, ask questions, and reflect on what it meant to care for others. He knew that these lessons, though small, could shape her understanding of the world, teaching her that compassion is not always loud or dramatic, but often quiet, steady, and profound. Back at home, the woman began to feel a subtle change within herself. The encounter had sparked something that extended beyond the immediate relief of having extra food. She found herself thinking about how she could create similar moments for others, even if only in small ways. Perhaps it was a smile, a word of encouragement, or a tiny gesture of support for someone else who might be struggling. The experience had become a lesson in the quiet power of noticing, understanding, and acting without expectation. She also began to consider the future more optimistically. For weeks, her mind had been dominated by worry and uncertainty, but now there was a glimmer of hope. She thought about opportunities to improve her circumstances, to seek better work, to explore resources and community programs that could provide additional support. While the challenges were still present, they no longer seemed insurmountable. The brief encounter with kindness had reminded her that help could exist, and that she could reach out when needed without fear of shame or judgment. Over time, the small ripple of kindness began to influence her daily decisions. She approached people with more openness, recognized moments where she could assist others, carried a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had been supported in a meaningful way. Her child continued to flourish, and the bond between them grew stronger, strengthened by the lessons of resilience, love, and the knowledge that they were not alone in the world, in her community. She started to notice acts of kindness more often, whether large or small. Each act, each moment of awareness reminded her that even the most difficult circumstances could be softened by empathy. She realized that the world was filled with people who cared, even if those gestures were often unnoticed. It inspired her to contribute to that kindness, to pay forward the quiet support that had been shown to her, and to teach her daughter the value of empathy through example. For the single father, the memory of the encounter remained a guiding principle. He continued to observe, to listen, and to act with thoughtfulness when possible. He found fulfillment in knowing that even a simple gesture could transform a moment, alleviate a burden, and create hope. The encounter with the woman and her child became a touchstone, a reminder that noticing, understanding, and caring could make a tangible difference in someone's life. Months passed, and while life continued to present challenges, both the woman and the single father carried the lessons of that day with them. The woman found strength in her resilience, hope in the knowledge that others could see and respond to her efforts, purpose in nurturing her child with love and determination. The father continued to foster empathy and awareness in his own family, modeling the quiet courage and care that had made such an impact. In small, meaningful ways, the world around them became brighter, more compassionate, and connected. The story of that winter afternoon, of a mother carrying her burden quietly and a father responding with understanding, became a silent testament to the power of human connection. It reminded both of them, and eventually the people around them, that kindness, empathy, and noticing the struggles of others can transform ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. Even in the smallest gestures, in the quiet acts of care, lives could be touched. Hope could be rekindled, and the future could feel a little less uncertain. And in that shared humanity, both the woman and the father found a lasting sense of purpose, resilience, and the quiet joy that comes from seeing and supporting one another in a world that too often overlooks the simple, profound acts of kindness that bind us together.